welcome to another episode of Become. My guest today is Ivna Curi, and she amplifies voices by speaking up, self advocacy, and assertive communication skills. Through her podcast, Speak Your Mind Unapologetically, and book, Unapologetic Voices, she empowers open, fearless expression. Her insights as a Forbes contributor and TEDx speaker on how to speak up safely when it's psychologically unsafe, combined with her technical background, international experience, and MBA, provide a foundation for her teachings. Wow, I can't wait to get her on stage because she is right down there where I always be so passionate about talking about communication. So without any further ado, let me get Ivna on stage. And there she is. Welcome, Ivna.
Thank you, Sabine. So happy to be here.
So first of all, I want to know, Ivna Curi, what origin is that?
So I'm originally from Brazil, and Brazilians are a mix. We're a recent country, and we are a mix of many ethnicities from Europe, Africa. I have some Middle East, and we're just a big melting pot.
Well, I believe the world gets smaller because more people migrating everywhere, and we have to be open for that as well. So I like it that we both are from originally from different countries. Now you live in the United States?
Yes, I've been living here for a while, and I've previously was living in the Middle East, and before that in France, so Europe. And yeah, it's been wonderful.
I believe when we live in different countries, when we travel, we are a little bit more open minded than if you just stay in your own country. And of course, here in the United States, it's so huge and vast, and even here in the States, it's so different from one point to another. Sometimes we don't even feel the need to travel, but I always encourage people to do that because that will help you to understand people more. And being a communication coach, and you as well talk about how we can communicate, I think it's so important. What is your take on that?
100%. So when I was in college, I felt constrained by the culture in Brazil and I wanted to expand. And I was always interested in different cultures and curious. And I think the key word was curious. And once I was able to get out, I studied at INSEAD or INSEAD, which is the most international business school in the world. And that was exactly what I was looking for. I wanted to explore different cultures because different people, my best friends are people with very different backgrounds than myself. And those are the most interesting conversations. And it removes a lot of the assumptions and biases that we have. And it expands our ability to enjoy life and relate to more people. I've learned so much. I truly appreciate life a lot more because of my Japanese friends, right? With a lot of their philosophies that are so different than Brazil or United States. Obviously, now we discovered each other, and I love having German friends. Right, there's a lot to be learned from German culture, and I think that not only does it enhance our lives, but it improves our communication significantly, because there's not only one way to communicate. And the cultures, as the book, there's a book written by Erin Mayer from INSEAD. She's a professor at INSEAD who talks about culture maps, which is how our communication is fundamentally different in different countries. But there's
Yeah.
also a lot of things in common. So learning that there's no absolute rights or wrong. It's more about how do we communicate effectively even across cultures.
Yeah. And one of the things what you just said is we communicate different in different countries. And even the melody or how you say that, and I hear this a lot with German, it's a harsh language, and it's tough. When I first came to the States, I was having a performing arts school, and my students thought I was angry at them. So, oh, Miss Sabine, she's always so strict. And it's just the way we speak. I think I learned to soften it up a little bit. But yeah, this is how it is. And and that's another thing. And I would like to get your take on this as well, because um, when we are face to face with a person and see their reaction and their body language as well, it is different than just communicating via text, which nowadays that's what it is. So many times we don't even look at each other anymore. So can you give us your take on that part of the way we communicate today, so much less in person and visual than texting and using all these modern uh, devices that we have?
I think that's a great question. Things have changed for sure post COVID, or during COVID. And one of the things I always try to do is to communicate at least on Zoom, because that gives at least some element of nonverbals. Now, I think what's important when we move into the virtual world and we're not physically present anymore, if we can't be physically present, because there are benefits to virtual connection, because we can connect. It would be very difficult to record this with you, Sabine, if we didn't do this virtually. So one of the things that I like to do is emphasize our vocal variety, emphasize our vocal aspects. So our melody, our range of voice, our tone, our volume, the rhythm, the pauses, that can make up a little bit for some of the lost elements of our physical body language, when we're not present, when we're virtual. So that's something that I like to focus on. And one of the things that's interesting, both you and me, we record ourselves, like we've seen ourselves, we've listened to ourselves, but most people hate listening
Mm.
to their voices. And in order to improve our vocal variety, we do need to listen to our voices recorded and get over that. I don't know what your experience has been with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I hear this all the time from my clients. Oh, I hate listening to me. Oh, I hate watching me. First of all, I said, don't use that word hate, because you are talking to yourself like this way, right? And so we have to, again, it goes with the mindset. But what you said, it's so important to have also an interesting way of listening to a person with vocal variety. That's one of the things that I teach just as well as you do. Now, your podcast is Speak Unapologetically. So tell us, what was the why did you start this podcast, and what is your podcast about?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Sabine. One of the things that I struggled with throughout most of my 20s and even early 30s, especially in my 20s when I was entering the workforce. And my podcast, Speak Your Mind Unapologetically, is about speaking up in the workplace and being unapologetic and having an unapologetic voice. Thus, the book title. In the workplace is that I had been focusing all this time on my credentials, on being a great student, on doing all the right things, studying hard. I was acknowledged as such, as a studious lady. And then when I entered the workforce, I had issues because I was expected to speak up in meetings. I was expected to have an opinion. I was expected to express things with conviction and confidence, which I did not have. I was expected to follow up with people, to get information, and to communicate a whole lot more than I was used to. And on top of that, I had all this knowledge. I had usually better degrees than everybody else around me, but I still didn't feel worthy or like the right person or experienced enough to speak my mind and to share what I had to share. And when I did, it was so soft spoken, it was so low volume, it was so apologetic that nobody listened and nobody took me seriously. And it was when I got my first job as a manager that things crumbled. All of this intellectual capability and degrees weren't doing anything for me, and I was having a lot of trouble. My boss was not happy with my performance because I wasn't speaking up enough, and that was always the feedback I would get. You're very nice, but I need to hear you. You need to speak up. And I wondered, why was I not speaking up? And that led to working. I had a wonderful boss who taught me how to do that in an
Mm.
effective way. And that changed my life completely, my leadership and my ability to be myself and be effective. And I realized that that's the number one skill I wish I had learned earlier. And I said, I need to
Mm.
share this skill of speaking up, which is called assertive communication with the world, because nobody is taught this in schools. Nobody is taught this at work. Their bosses don't teach them this. They don't learn this with their families at university. So I needed to create a place. I needed to share this knowledge and inspiration with the world. And that's how Speak Your Mind unapologetically came about.
That is a beautiful story. But one thing that you said is you had one person, so that was the one boss who helped you with that, who taught you. So, what was it with that boss that helped you become more unapologetic, that helped you speak up, that helped you have that strong communication? So, what was that?
Yeah. Thank you again for your curiosity, Sabine. I love your questions. So, this boss happened to be the chief commercial officer at a new company that I had just joined. And what's interesting about him is that even though he was many levels above me and I was being a manager for the first time, he he would ask for my advice and thoughts on things all the time. If I got in trouble, if there was a situation, he didn't tell me what to do. If there was conflict, which there was every single day in that role, right? He would say, Ivna, what do you think is the best way to handle this? And if I wasn't willing to speak up and have the hard conversations, he'd call me up every 30 minutes and ask me, did you have the conversation? And there was no way to run around, to run away from that. And then when I had the hard conversations where I did speak up, when I did share my thoughts, then he would ask me, how did it go? What did you think? How did you feel? How could you have done better? And another thing I remember, just for context, the very first day of this job, I was 24 years old. I was a manager for the first time in a new company with a new boss. He took me and him went to this client who is one of the biggest I'll tell you, it's Walmart.
Mhm.
And Walmart and their director of for supply chain was really upset with our delivery. So we went there in order to sort out the issues that were happening. And because I was in charge of supply chain management, they were they had massive problems with us. This man who was much older than me, very intimidating looking, was really upset. My boss shows up with me. My plan was to stay quiet, stay in the corner, say nothing, and just observe. But that was not the plan that my manager had for me. I sat at the corner of the room away from these two older men. And my boss says, no, 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 no. You come here, sit next to me. And I knew nothing about anything. I was clueless about this whole situation. And I remember my manager would turn to me and say, Ivna, what do you think? In front of this intimidating, angry man from Walmart, what do you think? How would you go about this? And I had to speak up. And on our way back that day in the car, back to the company, he kept probing me once again. How do you think it went? What do you think we should do now? Of course, he had all the answers, but he wanted me to speak up. And that was a
He is
transformational
a
year for me.
good leader. I mean, what he
He's
did,
amazing.
amazing, amazing. And uh, these are the leaders we need today. It's not those, and oftentimes I see that too, those bullies, right? Said, well, I'm the greatest, I am the best, and no, just me, and look at me, and look at me, and look at me. um, those are the ones who have really, they're small minded, they are very insecure, and you can see this, the landscape everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's in workplaces, politics, no matter where. There are those people who are, thinking that they are the greatest and no one else is better than them. Watch out. So I love what you shared with us, because that also gives a little bit more perspective of how you became from being that small voice, quiet, soft spoken, to become that outspoken person that you are today. It's not something that happened from one day of another. It's a process of becoming, right? So I love that story. So you started, uh, you started your podcast. That was kind of or maybe from your experiences. So let's go back now. What do you do now?
Yeah, so this is what I do. I help individuals, professionals to be able to speak up and speak up for three specific things. Speak up to be better leaders, right? Because it's important to express our ideas or thoughts. It's important to be able to express concerns. It's important to speak up on behalf of our team, to support others, to get resources, but as well as speak up for our own self advocacy, which is to make sure that we have the wellness, that we're treated with respect, and speak up for our career growth and development within our roles, our jobs, our companies, our own company, or speak up in order to, in your case, I know you work with you have an audience with a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Speaking up is so necessary to bring visibility to yourself, to your ideas, and to what you have to share in the world. We cannot make a massive impact in this world if we're not communicating and talking about these things. But the important aspect is how we communicate. And I think you talk a lot about this, Sabine. And in my specific focus is speaking up assertively, which
Mm.
is speaking up in
So
a
how can we do
respectful.
that? How can we speak up more assertively?
Great question. Assertiveness often gets a very bad reputation. People think that assertiveness is being pushy, aggressive, rude,
Mhm.
difficult, and it's not. The core ethos of assertive communication is respect. And most people
Mm.
don't realize that. In order
Mhm.
to be assertive, we need to be respectful to others. People need to feel respected. Otherwise, we cannot be effective. But assertive communication is also about speaking up in a way that's effective. That means that we're able to influence behavior. Now, notice I'm saying influence, not control, because when you get into control territory, that's aggression. That's a different type of communication. And we want to be able to influence because there's no point in simply speaking out what I call is like vomiting words simply to let go of our frustrations or be unapologetic. And that's what most people think when I say unapologetic, but that is not the case. When I say being unapologetic, it's about being unapologetic with intention, with skill, with respect, with calm, with composure, because that's going to lead to positive outcomes for ourselves and for others.
I love it. And it's that unapologetic means, you don't have to apologize of who you are when you do this with respect, and when you do this from the heart and the head, with some knowledge behind it. So if you could give our listeners like 1 to 3 tips how they could improve speaking up with strength, unapologetically, assertively, what would that be?
I would say the first one is to cultivate courage. And the reason I say courage is because I've never felt, most of the time, I never felt confident speaking up. Certainly not the first few times I did anything. I was not confident walking into the TEDx stage. I was not confident being on my podcast the first few times. I was not confident doing any type of public speaking for a very long time. And what really changes things is when we know how to find our courage. And so I would say look for courage. Look and focus on courage more than anything else, because that will get you to speak up. That's number one, courage together with skill. And this is where it's so important to learn the principles of assertive communication. It's not hard, but it'll show you how to speak up in a way that will not be offensive to other people, but will allow people to understand your perspective and will reduce misunderstandings that often happen when we try to speak our truth, when we try to express our concerns, when we try to deliver feedback, when we try to challenge others or tell people what we want or ask for things or set boundaries. Sometimes we're misunderstood, and that's because we don't know what we're doing. One of the number one rule of assertive communication, for example, is to use I statements. I statements is about owning our reality, our communication. I felt hurt instead of you hurt me. You were disrespectful, right? That's not going to work in assertive communication. It's I felt disrespected in this specific situation. So we need to talk about very specific things with I statements, especially when it's negative, and invite people to take action. We always have to request something. Tell people what we expect them to do. Just complaining or saying, I'm hurt is not enough. We need to say, well, next time we're in this situation, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to speak in this way. I'd like you to send me this presentation in advance, 24 hours. We need to be able to be very specific in our requests. That's also a very important aspect. And one third thing in terms of assertive communication is we need to remove assumptions. Assumptions are relationship killers. And the best way of doing that is to ask questions, but also what we call self-disclosure, which is we can't assume people know what we want, need, think, feel. We need to tell them. And we need to tell them in a very clear way.
Mm. I like what you just said. So to just summarize that, cultivate courage. And that is really a skill that can be learned to be more courageous, right? Confidence, that's what I always say, can be learned. Confidence is a skill. And then I also like what you said with the I statement rather than, oh, you made me feel this way. No, I felt ABC. So it brings it back to you. And it's not like when you say you to the other person, it's like they feel almost attacked. So I love that. Use the I statement and then also let people know what you expect from them. Maybe the next time, if we can do ABC differently, then they also know, okay, yes, it's a start. But the third thing is huge. Remove assumptions. I don't know if you're familiar with the Four Agreements. The book, The Four Agreements, it's beautiful. And one of the agreements says, don't make assumptions. And so often we do. So often. And I always have to remind myself, and even when I have a conversation with my husband and we're talking about a situation, said, well, we assume that, but maybe it's totally different. So I love that. I love that. So, if people want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to learn more of what you do, or listen to the podcast, or get your book. You have your book out that just came out on Friday. So, what is the best way to get in touch with you or maybe get your book?
Yes, there are many ways. Amazon is one of them. So go to Amazon and search in book section unapologetic voice. Go to my website as well at assertiveway.com/unapologetic voice. And you'll have access to that, as well as a number of bonuses, mini courses that help speak up, overcome some of these barriers to speaking up and finding the courage to speak up, as these are extra little mini courses, 1 hour each, that will accompany the book if you come through the website. And the podcast, Speak Your Mind Unapologetically, that is free. Oh, one more thing. The book is actually available for free if the listener has Kindle Unlimited. So for now, they can get
Great.
it for free as long as they're signed up for Kindle Unlimited. And then the podcast, Speak Your Mind Unapologetically, in the podcast platform of your preference.
Wonderful. And I make sure all the links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ivna, for sharing your wisdom, your insights today with our audience.
Thank you, Sabine. It was a pleasure.